It's been a minute since I've done one of these import tier lists, but two teams in the Berlin Thunder and the Enthroners have recently just announced their last import signings. And the first team we're going to look at is the Berlin Thunder. Berlin are kind of a hard one because they've kind of been stuck in purgatory for the last few years. You know, they're not a bad team, certainly not. But are they going to contend for a championship? I'm not so sure, but I guess we'll find out with their imports. They do have a lot of good German players that could start on multiple teams in the ELF, so they could make a run for it, you know, and we'll kind of delve into their imports today and kind of see what we can see. Just a quick recap, we have All-Star, Starter, Role Player, Bench Player, Questions Remain. I have a whole playlist of all of these so far. If you're unfamiliar with the rules, you can go and check another one. Some people have said they don't like hearing the rules every time, so we're just going to get straight into it. We have 10 players to look at. The first player we're going to look at is Harry Sayer. British offensive tackle. He came from Milan. He was at the Invaders previous to that and at Leeds University. One of my favourite offensive linemen in the UK, honestly. He's hyper aggressive. He uses his angles super well. He's not like the most elite anchor, and his footwork maybe could use a bit of sharpening up. But as far as him being a pretty damn good right tackle, I think that he is. And I'm kind of going between these because tackle is a very competitive market in the ELF, and he isn't as experienced as many of the others. There's a few guys I would take maybe over Harry, although he is a great player. I think that he's going to start for me here, but he could easily come into here with a solid season. Milan did have a pretty good offensive line last year. You know, they gave Luke a pretty good amount of time. They had Thomas Felicia, they had Harry Sayer, they had Lewis Thomas, and he was kind of an underrated part of that. So I'm going to put him in there. And yeah, I think that his game is good. It just needs a bit more development. I think with a good offensive line coach, he could easily start edging into All-Star, because he's big too. He's certainly not a small guy. He's 6'4.5", 300. He's young. He's 23 or 24, so he definitely has potential to go up into starter. He's a prospect to look out for this year, absolutely. Ludwig Myron will go for next, a Swedish outside linebacker. Of course, the main thing with Ludwig, and that's kind of stopped him getting into maybe the CFL, is his size. You know, he is a DB size. He's listed at 6 foot, 214 pounds. So he is a smaller outside linebacker, but what he does do, he's super quick, really good in open space. His movement is very solid. His pass coverage and run stopping ability is good. As far as pass coverage linebackers, because of his speed, and it's basically a nickel, I think he's one of the better ones. I think he starts on every team. He's borderline all-star, absolutely. And he actually finished with 6 sacks this season, which is a career high for him, and pretty damn good. So I think that he's an all-star. I think he's a star player, a starter player. I think that he could edge into all-star. His outside linebacker is pretty competitive, and he is one of the guys that's going to be in that conversation. Kind of going back and forth. He is going to be older now. He's going to have more experience. He's going to have arguably a better team around him. So we could see him go to all-star, but for now, I'm going to list him as a solid starter. He is not a role player. He is certainly a starter, in my opinion. And we could see him edge into All-Star with a good season here. Lucas Lavin, the next player, also Swedish. You're going to see a lot of Swedish, you're going to see a lot of Finnish, and the Brit, with Harry Sayer, so shout out to my Northern Europeans. We're going to go with Lucas Lavin. Played at Northern Colorado, also played at Chattanooga. Legit player. It sounds really blunt, but he is that guy. He has strength, good leverage, strong push. Maybe not the most elite blocker in space, and in terms of his get off, maybe it could be a little bit slower, but for me, there's a guy who can play at tackle and on inside. He's huge. He's listed at 6'5", 327 pounds, so he's a massive guy. I think that he's going to be in contention for All-Star with a good year, and with Harry next to him, they can both kind of flourish. I'm imagining they're going to play him at left tackle. Not confirmed. I'm not affiliated with the Berlin Thunder, but that's kind of where I see him going as left and Harry going as right, to give Sullivan as much time as possible, and we'll get to him in a minute. But as far as linemen go, definitely one of the most elite in Europe. Emil Horvd, Swedish, surprise surprise, 7 sacks last year. Him and Ludwig are kind of very similar, not in terms of play style or position, but just kind of in the young Swedish player who is dynamic, athletic, and can get to the quarterback. That kind of just seems to be their similarities. He has a high motor, strong hands, burst off the line isn't what I would call elite. Like, it's not like Alessandro Fernandez level, and it's not like he doesn't have the bend of an elite pass rusher yet. He is still 23, and he did get 12 tackles for a loss this season, so he's going up every single season. He's doing better in Europe, and this season I see it kind of being the same. I'm going to put him as a starter. I said before on some other ones that pass rush is just such a competitive position. Defensive end in general is such a competitive position. It's going to be hard for these younger guys who are improving every season to break into that. Especially when you've got the teammate on the other side that they have. You know, you could argue, and it probably was with 6 and 7 sacks, one of the reasons why is Kyle Kitchens, because he just takes up sometimes triple teams, which is unreal. But again, we'll get to them in a minute. I'm getting overzealous. Aleski Olevo, interior defensive lineman, played at Helsinki, is now moved over to Berlin Rebels, and has then continued to the Berlin Thunder. They're going to move him around. Like, he moves a lot. Like, he goes from defensive lineman, he'll go into the interior line, he'll be like a guy who can pull. Very good in space, actually, as an offensive lineman. Because of his time at D-lineman, his lateral movement is actually really solid. He has a good get-off, he can explode out. Kind of think, what I kind of feel like they're going to do is use him kind of like how Ryan used Yesaraji. Not in the same way of athletic ability, in my opinion, but in terms of positional flexibility, I think he's going to be moving around, maybe on like big packages. They're going to give him a 50 number. They're going to put him on the big packages on the goal line and stuff like that, or power plays, and he's going to be effective in the offense and also on the defense. That's what I think they're going to use him for. He is really solid get off, as I said, as a defensive lineman. Kind of shorter lengthwise in his frame, and his change of direction isn't elite. Like, his lateral movement across the line of scrimmage is good, but if he has to change direction, not so much. He kind of lacked production in the GFL, only half a sack for a defensive lineman playing majority defensive line, if not all defensive line. You know, which you could question, but as I've said before, interior defensive lineman's got better this year, but I think that he would be, for me, a role player. Viljo Lepinen, defensive back, Finland, no surprise there. He's lengthy, he's about 6'1", 200 odd pounds, has a good build. Played 11 games for them last year. He has length, he has stabbing hands, he does track the ball fairly well. If he's playing corner, his kind of back pedal can be quite high up, quite static, and his footwork isn't as good as it needs to be. Has lacked the ability to turn the ball over last season, especially. He had 2 pass deflections, 11 games, didn't get any interceptions. I'm going to put him as role player as well. I think him and Aleski kind of fit into the same reign of solid role players, with Harry being the guy that can move into starter. Now we get into the Americans. Alex Spillum will be the first player we talk about. I actually really highly rated Alex Spillum when he went into the league last season, and I was right to do so, because he was an underrated DB. He got 5 interceptions, which I think a lot of people miss out on, and a forced fumble. Fun fact, he actually played Lever Lewis, the Barcelona Dragons quarterback, in college when he was at the Cajuns, and he was at Coastal Carolina, which is pretty interesting. I think that he's an all-star potential player. He wasn't an all-star last season, but he could be this year, and I don't really mean that. He's lengthy, he's a good tackler, takes good angles, obviously has an eye for the ball. All-star guy. I mean, to be honest, like 5 picks in 11 games, it's pretty damn good. He's shown that he can be that. He starts on most teams at safety, and I think that he's definitely here, but I think he will be here. That's how I see his season going. If he gets another 5-pick season, it's kind of hard to ignore that. Berlin, like I said with the purgatory thing, people just kind of forget how good Berlin's defense is sometimes. Like, these guys are weapons. You got Spillum that was really solid, and you've got Kyle Kitchens too. Speaking of Kyle Kitchens, is anyone really going to be surprised like if I put him as anywhere else other than All-Star? 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, multiple-time All-Star, the best defensive end in the league, and he is my lock for an All-Star vote. Like, obviously, he's at 43.5 career sacks, got 15 last year, 16 the year before, was getting triple teams this year, and still managed to lead the league in sacks. It's Kyle Kitchens. If I'm being very picky, you know, he may be short size, you could say, and maybe not elite bend of the edge, you could also say, but his get off is electrifying. So fast. Doesn't get knocked around off course, like has the strength and the bulkiness just to take offensive linemen and continue going. Like the stabbing hands of some of the better offensive linemen, like Milanovic in Vienna, who is one of the best offensive linemen in the entire league. He did not really get pushed off track. Like, Milanovic had some wins, of course. He's a fantastic offensive lineman. But for Kyle Kitchens to be hit by someone that big and not go off track is crazy. And obviously, not even for me, but probably for everyone, he's going to be an all-star at the end of the season. Maybe even another Defensive Player of the Year. I would not be surprised in the slightest. Aaron Jackson. As I said before the year, Berlin have so many weapons, and Robin is one of the best European receivers in the league. So Jackson was getting one-on-one with the American corner, American DB, and of course kind of suffered a little bit more while his German teammates would thrive off of him taking away the American DB. Having said that, 886 yards and 15 touchdowns is pretty bloody good. He could be an all-star, has really good potential on punt and kick return. I'm going to put him as an all-star level player because he easily could be. They had issues with their offense at the start of the year. I think they went too heavy on the pass, personally, and became extremely predictable offensively, and it kind of led to Jackson maybe not having the most success that he could have, because he's an easy 1,000 yard receiver. Everyone knows how good he is. He's an elite return man. Just need to get him the ball and allow him to get in space, because when he's in space he can take off. He finds space super well, so I don't think it'll be that hard to get him into these positions, because even when he'll contort his routes so that he finds the space between coverage, which is just a sign of his elite receiver. Play speed again. I think if he knows he's not getting the ball, maybe a little bit lower. And being nitpicky, Aaron Jackson is an all-star receiver. This last one is an incredibly hard one to grade for me. Jacob Sullivan, of course, former Offensive Player of the Year, champion of the league, all-star. Injury issues. Last season, missed a couple of games due to injuries. Is accurate, has a good and short and intermediate game, but sometimes his decision making can be a bit lackluster, and defensive reading sometimes isn't where you need it to be. Do I think that Sullivan can win a championship in 2024? That is the big question I kept asking myself, and I'm gonna say no. I don't think that he can. I think that the amount of quarterback talent in the league is growing every single year, and he is going to be a starter for me. Like, he starts over nearly everyone. I think he's probably going to be, those two are very similar, so I'll put him kind of around here. He is, of course, a great quarterback. For like me and Nick Alfieri talked about this a little bit when him and Silas didn't put Sullivan in a top 5 quarterback list, and I didn't either. And some people were quite annoyed by that and would comment on the left stuff like about Sullivan being a top 5 quarterback. Is he on the outskirts of that? Yes. Like, he's a top 10 quarterback, definitely. He's a top, I'd say a top 10 solidly. And with a really good year, he could be an all-star. We've seen the passing emphasis from Berlin, so he could get a bunch of numbers and be an all-star. That's kind of how I can see it. However, with more pass attempts comes more potential turnovers. That's not something that Sullivan has really struggled with in his career, so I think that he could manage that well, and he could get the weapons out. He's got excellent weapons, so he could be an all-star. I'm a little bit on the fence about whether he can win a championship in today's climate. With the amount of quarterbacks that are coming in that have done really, really well, and the amount of crazy talent on other teams. Do Berlin have the best German talent? I don't think they do. And that is ultimately how leagues are decided in the year left. So that's going to round us out. It is a good import class. I'm very pleased with how they've done it. They have multiple all-star potential players. Their Americans are excellent. And they have a lot of players that are returning from last season, which I think is important for many reasons, of course. That's going to round us out. Elevapedia have a document with all my stuff on it about rating them by points. That's pretty awesome. So I'm interested actually to see where this one lands, because I can't remember where some of the other ones are. But that's going to round us out. Hope you guys have a good day. I'm going to try and get the Enthroners one out like ASAP. I might even get it out today or tomorrow. And then maybe change the jumper and pretend it's the next day. But hope you guys are good. Thank you very much. See you later, and goodbye.